Welcome back. We are here with a bike I've had for a little while and I've kept it on the down low. The Harley content seems to get a bit of a mix. Some people love it, some people aren't into it. But we're going to talk about my relatively new 23.5 Road Glide CVO. If you're new to Harleys, we'll talk all about what are the different Harley lines, a little bit more into that if you haven't seen my other video about the Road King I had that I sold to get this. How did I end up with this? Why did I get it? What are the modifications I've made? Because even though it's a CVO, which is basically the best of the best, a little bit of foreshadowing there with what Harley makes, there's still some customizations I added to make it a little bit better, make it a little bit more unique to me. So with all that, stay tuned and let's get into it. So first, if I was new to Harley-Davidson and even new to motorcycling in general, but if I was an adventure rider and I was looking to do adventures on a Harley-Davidson, like I want to go on long road trips, and I think this is what makes Harley-Davidson so great. They are probably the best bikes on the highway, in my opinion, especially the touring models. Let's get into a little bit of detail first and why I think that is. So when you start a Harley-Davidson, it has that classic like chugga 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 pop sound, you know, and it sounds like it's gonna like die, and it's got that like vibration front to back. And what's really weird is I was like, it sounds like they don't run very well, right? Because you start like your KTM or your Hondas and it's just like, you know, it's like a consistent buzzing, but like Harleys have this like ducka 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 pop, you know, like this kind of classic Harley sound. So what's unique about that is that the motors are actually balanced front to back, right? So generally they try to balance, you know, because it's a V-twin. And so a lot of times bikes will be balanced side to side, or, you know, they try to get rid of that movement. But on the Harley, they have it so when the motor is shaking, basically it's moving front to back. So that's what gives it that classic rattle. However, once you give the bike a gas and you start moving, your forward momentum zeroes out all of that vibration. So you feel nothing. So unlike, like say on my Triumph Tiger 900, it's a triple, you still feel that quick vibration in the handlebars, you still feel the vibration of the motor. But on a Harley, once you give it gas, all because the motor is balanced front to back, your forward movement, again, just zeroes out that chatter and you don't feel any vibrations. So it is super, super smooth. And so with that technical detail, that's why I think if you're gonna do long road trips, if you're gonna do like kind of grand American touring, as Harley coined the term, you really can't beat a touring model Harley-Davidson. So if I wasn't going to buy a Pan America, so if I was an adventure rider, I'm like, I already got my ADV bike and I want something that's fun on just paved roads. So let's just take the Pan America out of it. I would look at 4 bikes. 3, 4, yes, 4 technically. 3 are kind of the same. It just kind of comes down to your personal preferences on some minor things, and 1 bike is quite a bit different. So the 3 are really the Grand American touring models. And there's 3 models, but they share basically the same frame, roughly the same motor, depending upon what year you get. And then there's just some different bells and whistles depending upon what model you get. So I had a Grand American Touring Harley-Davidson Road King, so that just has no front, I had to put a windshield on it, no front fairing. There's the Street Glide, which was I think the most popular selling motorcycle in the world for a long time, and it has that classic batwing fairing, like if you're used to seeing like a police cruiser before a lot of them switched to BMWs, like that kind of classic police bike look, that's a Street Glide. And then last but not least, the CVO, or the Road Glide. CVO is just a trim, we'll talk about that later, but the Road Glide, which is kind of that shark nose fairing. And the fairing on the Road Glide is actually fixed to the frame. So much like your ADV bike, if you're riding like a KTM 1290 or like a Tiger 900 or Nord 901, KTM 890, all of those bikes, that fairing is fixed to the front wheel, or not to the front wheel, the fairing is fixed to the body or the frame, and so when you turn the handlebars, it turns inside. So most people struggle with that on Harleys because that's like a new thing, but for ADV riders, like it'll feel natural, right? Because you're used to that fairing being stuck forward and the handlebars turning with him. So those bikes are all kind of the same. It's just really kind of the wind deflection piece and kind of some of the smaller things, like if you have like a little phone cubby, do you want it like a push out thing? Do you want 2 drawers? Do you want a big fairing? Do you want just to put on a windshield? Like it's that kind of minor stuff. The ride quality, engine, all pretty much the same. The fourth bike that kind of sits in its own category is the Lowrider ST. And actually, if I sold my Road Glide that I have now, that is probably the bike I would buy. Although I really do want to spend a lot of time on a Pan America off-road. I've ridden the Pan America on-road a lot, but I want to get one in the dirt. That's all over caveat. But the Lowrider ST is essentially Harley-Davidson's sport touring bike. So it has a bigger motor, so it generally has like the 117 or like the same motor that's in the bigger bikes. So the same motor that's in your Road King, Road Glide, Street Glide, so a bigger motor, but a smaller bike. So it's a little bit smaller. You know, I think the Grand American touring models are gonna be like 800 pounds. We'll talk about the weight later, and I don't think it's necessarily a negative thing. I think it might be a bit of a positive in a lot of ways. And then the Street Glide ST is going to be in that like 600, 650 pound range. So it's quite a bit lighter, but it has the same motor. So you have a lot of performance because you have that big motor in a lighter package. The geometry is actually built to handle a little bit better. So it's handled to be a little bit more sporty. So if you're into like riding canyons and stuff, and it actually has more of a, say, that classic Ford control feel. The controls actually sit more mid-control. So it's a little bit better through the canyons and stuff. You can still do long distance on them. The frame is kind of like their soft tail frame is what they call it, as opposed to their Grand American Touring frame. But the bike's just a little bit lighter, a little bit quicker handling, and ST actually stands for Sport Touring. So if I was going to sell the Road Glide, I probably would get the Lowrider ST. That is a super fun bike, and I've ridden one, and I would actually like to do a bigger day on one just to see how it feels. I bet it would be awesome. Probably can't go as far with a smaller gas tank, but I think like in some of the canyon roads up here, it'd be a really fun bike to ride. Because the touring models, like my Road King that I had built, if you haven't seen that video, check that out. Like with the taller suspension, the Legend suspension kit in it, that thing railed, it was awesome. It could handle corners far better than my terrible riding abilities. And it was a really fun bike. So, okay, so let's get into the next piece, which is like, what is a CVO and why did I get one? So every year, Harley-Davidson comes out, they have their CVO, which stands for Custom Vehicle Operations. And they kind of do one-off build, very limited quantity, one-off builds. And so they have a very special paint job. They generally do them in two colors. One's kind of a basic paint scheme, and then the other one's like a hand-painted. So much so, like if you wreck it, you have to send the body parts to Harley to get repainted. So they get repainted by hand here in the US. So it's like a custom one-off paint job. The details and the finishes are also a lot better. So you're gonna have like billet mirrors, heated grips, all the little details that normally on a bike that, like on a Harley, that might be kind of overlooked. Like the mirrors are kind of cheap and the foot controls are kind of basic. Those things are all upgraded. And in the 23.5 model, they actually completely redesigned the bike in general, and they were going to release the new Road Glide and Street Glides in 2024. They kind of pre-released them with the 23.5 CVO model. So we see the kind of new body pieces. So the rear bags are different, the fairing shapes are different, and I think they look really sweet. I actually was really interested in the new Street Glide because I think this, especially the new CVO Street Glide, I think looks absolutely amazing. And so on the CVO, not only do you have the new like fancy paint, nicer controls, all of that, generally you'll have a bigger motor. In this case, it comes with a 121. So my my Road King had a 117. So this is now a 121. This bike is also liquid cooled. So Harleys for a longest time have been air cooled only. This bike is now liquid cooled, and much like the Ducati will do and some other bikes, when you're at a stoplight, it'll turn off that rear cylinder if it's hot out to help keep the heat down until you give it gas again and the bike will take off. It has like hill control hold assist, so like you can squeeze the handle and it'll like hold the bike. It has upgraded Showa suspension. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So inverted front forks, Brembo brakes all the way around. Yeah, that's kind of it. So it's like everything that they could do from the factory that's kind of upgraded, they have done. And so then we'll get into like, well, why did then I decide to upgrade this bike from if it's already kind of the best? I think this is the one thing with Harley, even their CVO models, they know people are going to upgrade them, right? Regardless, they're going to upgrade them. I think one important thing to note on how I ended up with this bike, which I think is important, and we should probably touch on that. I love my Road King, and there are actually times when I miss it because with that Legend suspension, that +2 kit, and like all the mods, it did handle really good. It was a really fun bike to ride. I hated the short exhaust, but I had to do that for the suspension. But because they only make so many of them a year, there's a limited run. So my local dealership actually had sold, so it changed ownership, and it actually sold to a bigger group that owns a number of dealerships across the country. And so they really tried to kind of bring this dealership up to par with their other ones. And so they actually shipped 2 CVOs that they had left from other dealers here. So we actually had CVOs. I'm not sure our dealership ever got them before. They may have. If somebody knows, they could correct me if I'm wrong, but I never saw them there. So they shipped them here, and they shipped them here in the winter, and then they kind of sat. And then the 24 models were coming out. And so it was a bit of perfect timing because living in a smaller town, there's probably, the CVOs are very expensive. I think the new ones go for $54,000. I didn't pay anywhere close to that, but they're, you know, they're just an expensive bike. And so harder to sell that kind of bike in a smaller town. But the 23s have been sitting there for a while. And I had my Road King. When this Whiskey Neat Road Glide came out, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I want one. They look amazing. I enjoy my Harley now, so I kind of wanted the best of the best if I was going to go into the Harley thing. Went in, they gave me a killer deal. They wanted to get it off the showroom floor because the new ones are coming in. They gave me a great deal. That's how I got it. And actually, they still have a 23.5 seat Road Glide or Street Glide CVO. So if you live in Colorado and you're looking for one and you're looking for a great deal, I think it's like $15,000 off sticker, which is wild. So yeah, so if you want one, definitely we have one left. I think at least last time I was there, it was still there. So that's how I ended up with the bike. I thought they were amazing. Got a killer deal on it. So now, what are some of the things that I've customized or changed on Harley? So if you're new to Harley, I think this is probably one of the funnest things about the bikes. One thing I think Harley needs to do is reduce the price because they know everybody's gonna then spend money to like customize the bike. So that's, you know, I think it would be an easier way to get more people into it. Another reason why I think the Lowrider ST is awesome because the base cost is pretty low for most Harleys. And you get a lot of performance right out the gate. And then if you just might change the hand controls, foot controls, exhaust maybe, you're kind of ready to go. Seat definitely would be one thing. That's why I'm really interested. That's why I really like the Lowrider ST. Super cool bike. So on the Road Glide, what did I change out? I changed out the controls. So I changed out the riser, so that kind of how far it brings the handlebars back to me. I changed out the actual handlebars themselves and went to more of a moto style bar. On the newer Road Glides, they still have kind of the classic ape hangers, but they're not as tall. I think they're like maybe 8 or 12 inches from, and they're pretty close to the triple tree, so they're not like super up here, high up here. But you know, the higher your bars are, the more horsepower you get. If you didn't know that, it's like a secret to Harley, so get your bars up there. So I swapped it out to like a moto style bar, so it's just a little bit better handling, not so kind of wallowy in the steering. I did go with the Thrashin bars again because they make some things changed for the 24, so like there's no more throttle tube that slides into the end of the bar, so like there's some changes, some different hole patterns in order to run the cables because they're internally cable routed. Thrashin bars are awesome, except they're powder coat. Like if you're gonna get Thrashin bars, like wrap them in like 4 inches of foam, except for where you're gonna bolt it to the risers, because if you breathe on it, that powder coat will scratch. It's like made from Teflon. It's like the worst thing. I love what Thrashin's doing, but they gotta figure their powder coat out. It is awful. So I would not recommend that if you're worried about scratching your powder coat. Anyways, then I also, in the risers I got from a company called Death Metal Racing. I went with them because purely vanity, if I'm completely honest. He has a cool set of risers in matching controls that are all in like this Harley bronze color, and I just thought the bronze would be really nice with the Whiskey Neat color. And so I also got his foot controls, which are awesome. They're longer, so the floorboards are actually longer. So when you're kind of riding in the canyons, you can actually move your feet back and get kind of a more mid-control feel to kind of rip through the canyons. And then once you want to relax, you can move your feet back up. The one downside to the longer floorboards is it's kind of like a hard reach, especially for me, like 5'9" on a good day, trying to get that kickstand out. So with that, keep that in mind, you know, if you're thinking about running his floorboards. It does make it a little harder to get the kickstand out. I think there's kickstand extensions for basically the foot part that I could probably buy that might make it a little easier. I also went with his shifter pedal and his adjustable brake arm and brake pedal. I also went with the S&S intake and exhaust. S&S there's a million companies out there that make exhaust for Harleys. That's one thing about Harleys. They're like million parts are available for them. So like if you have fun building and you like wrenching and having fun on your bike, kind of having a project to build and work on, there are endless parts for Harley. You could essentially pull the motor out if you want. And there are companies that make motors, like S&S actually makes motors too. So if you want a bigger motor, you could swap the entire motor out. You can do chain drive conversions. Like there's just endless possibilities with these bikes. So I went with primarily I went with the S&S because they did this cool like smoked chrome, and I didn't want to go all black. The silver or like dark platinum paint scheme for 2023, their exhaust came in this like dark platinum or like dark chrome, smoked chrome, and I thought it looked really good. So S&S actually did like kind of a 2-in-1 exhaust. So you know, the exhaust comes out and it goes into one, so you get a little bit better torque, a little bit there's already a lot of torque on a Harley, but you get a little bit more torque and a little bit more power. And then also the teardrop air cleaner, which you can run, and then you don't have to run a rain sock. So you get better airflow, and you don't have to run a rain sock if it's raining really hard, because you're not sucking a bunch of water in because of the way it's designed, which I also liked. And it came in this like smoked chrome. Took a while to get. They were on back order for a while, but I did get that. Also saves a little bit of weight. I mean, 850-pound bike, not a bad idea to lose a little bit of weight where you can. And then last but not least, I did go with two other things. I did the Saddlemen step-up seat, but I did it in a tuck and roll. I loved my Saddlemen seat on my Road King with like kind of that flatter back. I had the gripper on there, so when you got in the canyons, it just kind of held you, and it was such a fun bike to run. But it could get a little uncomfortable on long rides. Better than the stock seat for sure. So this time I went with the step-up seat again to kind of have that more like planted feeling on the bike. I did get brown leather instead of black. The last one I had black with like the blue stitching. This one I just did all brown. And I got the tuck and roll because the tuck and roll is actually a little bit more comfort oriented. And this bike, I wanted it for more just big days. Like we did a big 425-mile day through the San Juan Mountains. If you saw my Colorado BDR video, we basically did that route, but on road, all paved. And we kind of did it in one day out and back. And that seat was amazing. And last but not least, I did put the Legends 13-inch rear shock, so it did raise it up like an inch in the back, or maybe it's the same. I'll have to look that up. It might be stock. 14s are up an inch or 2 inches, I think. So I think 13 is a little bit taller because I think stock is around 12. So I did the 13s in the rear with the rear gold reservoirs. I thought it looked really cool. I love the Legends on my bike, and so I thought I was going to get they don't make a cartridge kit for the front for the inverted Showa fork, so I just went with the rear. However, if they do make one for the front, I'm not going to get it because it didn't make that much of a difference, to be honest with you. The rear actually, the Showa suspension they had on there is fantastic. I didn't notice a massive performance upgrade or improvement. So that is it. That's the Road Glide. We got really long on this video. That's what I've done to it. Those are my thoughts on Harley. If you've made it this long, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me how much you hate this video. Tell me why you hate Harley-Davidson and why ADV riders should only ride ADV bikes and not Harley-Davidsons. And until next time, stay safe out there.